The holiday of Thanksgiving was designed to invoke a spirit of gratitude throughout the United States of America. This country's forefathers understood that the affluence enjoyed was not something that the nation should take for granted. Therefore, a federal holiday was declared so that every citizen would remember to be grateful for the land where fruited plains and amber waves of grain abound. However, in stark contrast to the admonishment of men and women who established the foundations by earnestly revering the God of the Bible, America has become a nation that breeds ingratitude. Should people today truly be thankful for the privilege of living in this country? Further, how should a true spirit of gratitude be expressed? To find out, stay tuned. Greetings from Quest for Truth, a program about the state of the world today and its future. Beginning with a proclamation by George Washington in 1789, the Thanksgiving holiday was inconsistently kept by the colonies of America for more than 7 decades. In 1863, Thanksgiving was proclaimed again, this time under the administration of Abraham Lincoln, who declared that the last Thursday of November should be celebrated annually as a time of thanksgiving and praise to our beneficent Father who dwelleth in the heavens. Since that proclamation, there has never been a month of November where America did not observe Thanksgiving. It has been an unbroken holiday for more than 150 years. Nevertheless, even though the government of the United States can designate national holidays, they can create and enact laws for commerce and conduct, but nobody can legislate gratitude. In fact, there is no higher authority able to force anyone to be grateful. Why, this is something that every individual must take it upon themselves to do. Nonetheless, an attempt to remind every citizen about the importance of gratitude led America's founding fathers to design a public day of Thanksgiving. But just who did our presidents, senators, and congressmen and women desire for us to be thankful to? And for what? Well, it's no secret that every American president from the very beginning acknowledged the providence of the God of the Bible. And since the first term of George Washington, every president of the United States has declared that the American people should acknowledge with grateful hearts and minds the many favors and obligations that we have toward God. Even in recent decades, those presidents whose loyalties are questionable have continued to declare that we should give thanks to each other and to God for the many kindnesses and comforts that affect our lives. Sadly, these sentiments are no longer shared by many people. Why, the current trend is to no longer recognize the God who made America a great nation. We have forgotten the facts of history, proving that this country could never have rose to become the most powerful and affluent nation the world has ever seen without the blessing of God. Thus, millions celebrate Thanksgiving today with a spread of turkey, mashed potatoes, fruits, vegetables, breads, pies, and cakes, and a wide variety of beverages. Friends and families enjoy social activities, and some will watch football, and tens of thousands will have too many alcoholic drinks on this day. In many cases, Thanksgiving will be a time of overindulgence rather than a day of humility and gratitude. And despite the fact that everyone owes a debt of gratitude, most remain ungrateful and take for granted the many things that we enjoy. Our affluence without regard for God has led to a materialistic society that feels entitled to what it receives without a need to be grateful. And this has much to do with human nature unrestrained. Left unchecked, human nature has a tendency to never be satisfied. Why King Solomon spoke of this inclination of men and women in Ecclesiastes in chapter 1, where he wrote, "All the rivers run into the sea, yet the sea is not full. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing." The point King Solomon was making is that mankind in general is like a sea that is never full. No matter how much we might have, in our minds there is always room for more. Why the tendency is to see our lives as being unfulfilled, and ingratitude is therefore widespread. Why the advertising industry feeds this tendency by marketing dissatisfaction. The top 200 advertisers in this country spend over $160 billion every year on campaigns that widely focus on making people feel as though their lives are incomplete unless they purchase their particular product. Slogans like, "Get what you want," "You need this," and "Get what you deserve" are used verbatim, and they have become the theme of this age. Why, I had read an article recently in the Washington Post in the Ask Amy section. The article was titled, "Ingratitude has reached epidemic proportions." And while responding to yet another reader who was unappreciated by her close friends, the consultant wrote, "Of every issue I cover in my column, questions regarding the lack of gratitude seem to dominate. Are we experiencing a gratitude deficit? Do people actually not feel gratitude? Do people lack the emotional tools to understand the connection between receiving something and expressing their thanks?" The answers to these questions are obviously yes. While the attitude of gratitude is becoming less and less common, there is a growing attitude of ingratitude that it's plaguing the nation of America and even the entire world. Why, it's an epidemic and people seem oblivious to the contagion. The Apostle Paul foresaw this prevailing characteristic of our age, and he wrote down a prophecy for us to consider. "But know this," he said, "that in the last days perilous times will come. For men and women will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, and unholy." Our society has widely become lovers of money. We love material possessions. People are proud, in fact, of immoral behavior today. They are disobedient to the values of our founding fathers, and widely we are a nation that is unthankful and unholy. Relative few Americans today have an appreciation of the Bible comparable to those that established the United States of America. We have lost sight of the values of the great God who gave us life and liberty. Corrupt politicians in recent decades have been working hard at legislating God and Christian values out of the country, and the principles of the Bible found in the Constitution are being disregarded by those who treat it like it's nothing more than an ancient document that has little meaning for modern America. As an example, despite nearly doubling its profits in the last 2 years, Amazon pays no taxes. The Institute on Taxation and Economy Policy explained the negative tax rate as being due to various unspecified tax credits. Further analysis reveals that Amazon becoming a master of tax avoidance is the result of paying millions of dollars, but not in taxes, instead paying it to the campaigns and pet projects of government officials. According to the business and market news source Bloomberg, Amazon spent more than $30 million lobbying lawmakers over the last 2.5 years. And this is how they avoid paying taxes on a profit of more than $16 billion. And this story is only a drop in the ocean of government corruption. Why legalized bribery has exploded in the last several decades. Why, it's public information showing that the total revenue among politicians in Washington, D.C. in 1975 was less than $100 million. But today, politicians share more than $3.5 billion in corporate payoffs, and that number is rising. Why, politicians voted into office are supposed to serve the best interest of American people, but they have become an ocean that is never full. And service to the greater good has taken a back seat to serving their special interests. And these immoral practices have led to injustice on a massive scale. And it has even caused irreparable harm and death to thousands who cannot afford health care, who cannot pay for expensive medications, and those forced to live in hazardous environments so that big business can prosper. Recently, a story broke about the recall of automobiles that have the potential to wound and to kill passengers. And used car dealers wanted to be able to sell these vehicles without fixing the problems and also not be responsible if accidents were to occur. And the answer to their money-hungry dilemma was to write their own law about the resale of recalled vehicles, and then they pay lawmakers to pass these laws in every state. And the result has been tragic for many drivers who purchased these vehicles unaware that they were driving a potential death trap. Why, over the last 20 years, an average of 12,000 special interest groups have given more than $54 billion to politicians who in turn meet in back rooms to create laws that will benefit their own interests. And it seems that there is little regard for doing what is right in Washington today. Why, America once had the greatest integrity a national government had ever seen. America was great when it revered the moral values of the Bible. Providence and manifest destiny was something that most people strongly believed, and it was evident. But such a thought has become taboo in the politically incorrect culture of today. Why, in the year 1950, 95% of the country claimed to be Christian or Jewish. By 1980, that number dropped to 91%. In 1990, it was 84%. 2010 saw a decline to 78%, and it is dropping rapidly. Why, it's estimated that approximately 65% of Americans today claim to believe in the God of the Bible. Nevertheless, the majority still claim to be Christian, but of those, how many recognize that God requires people to keep the commandments? Because Christ said, "If you love me, keep my commandments." And he was not talking about merely having love in your heart without any real evidence of expressing that love. Why, keeping his commandments means keeping the law as stated in the pages of the Old Testament. And here is the reason why there is widespread ingratitude in this country. You see, people no longer value the law found in God's commandments. But this law is the way to satisfaction. It is the way to prosperity, and a true expression of love is found in God's law. And for this reason, Quest for Truth is offering you a free book. The Eternal Church of God produces a variety of literature to help people understand the Bible and how God expects faithful people to live. Today we are featuring the book titled The 10 Commandments, and it answers the question, are they required today? This book not only explains from the Bible why we must keep the commandments, but also how they should be applied. All of our books and booklets are offered free as a service in the public interest with no undesired follow-up. You may visit our website to read or request this literature, or at the end of this program, we will show you how to receive a free copy of the 10 Commandments. Ladies and gentlemen, America once claimed to be one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Truly, this is no longer the case. As ex-President Obama pointed out,
whatever we once were, we are no longer a Christian nation, at least not just. We are also a Jewish nation, a Muslim nation, and a Buddhist nation, and a Hindu nation, and a nation of non-believers.
This man, who was once considered Commander-in-Chief of America's Armed Forces, openly declared that he and many others feels that America is no longer one nation under God. And the disunity is even encouraged in the name of diversity, as those who have Christian values are being marginalized. And this disunity is taught to America from the top down. Even the two-party system of democracy no longer functions for the greater good. Even though there has long been bickering in Washington, both Democrats and Republicans used to come together for the common good of the state. Sadly, there is no longer a call to do what is right just because it's the right thing to do. Instead, ingratitude and greed has caused many of the leaders of this country to do what is best for their own party, or worse yet, for themselves. Representatives stand up and all claim to speak on behalf of the American people, but it is vastly their personal interests that inspire debate. In stark contrast to this, to what is going on today, the nation of men and women that God established long ago were required to have integrity through and through. They were required to know the law according to God's standards and to live by that moral code. Why, notice what was written in this regard in the book of the law. When you come into the land which the Eternal your God is giving you, and possess it and dwell in it, and say, I will set a king over me, like all the nations that are around me. You shall surely set a king over you, whom the Eternal your God chooses, one from among your brethren. You may not set a foreigner over you, but he shall not multiply horses for himself, neither shall he multiply wives for himself, lest his heart turn away, nor shall he greatly multiply silver and gold for himself. Think about this for a moment. Why would God forbid his appointed leaders from accumulating wealth? Well, the reason is because their service toward the people would become self-serving. Why, remember what King Solomon wrote, human nature unrestrained is like a sea that is never full of water. And when pleasure and material possessions become the motivation of leadership, their integrity begins to fail, just as we see happening in Washington today. Contrary to what God declared, and contrary to what the founding fathers of this country forbade, politicians have set their sights on multiplying silver and gold for themselves. Notice what God said leaders should do. Also it shall be, when he sits on the throne of his kingdom, that he shall write for himself a copy of this law in a book. And it shall be with him, and he shall read it all the days of his life, that he may learn to fear the Eternal his God, and be careful to observe all the words of this law and these statutes, that his heart may not be lifted up above his brethren, that he may not turn aside from the commandment to the right hand or to the left, and that he may prolong his days in his kingdom. God said that leaders should write their own copy of his law, to know it, to read it regularly, and to live by it. Now, would any mayor, governor, congressman, or senator do such a thing today? Would the President of the United States follow this guideline? No, none would, because it would be contrary to what they practice. And even if a government official desired to live biblically, that is, by its values, it would be political ruin. Our ungrateful, politically correct culture does not want to give God any credibility today. And as a result, our culture is adopting a policy of no moral absolutes. Multiculturalism has led to multitheism, allowing for any deranged religion people might dream up. And because of America's current pluralistic approach, professed Satanists want their share of the spotlight. In 2015, a statue of a goat-headed figure called Baphomet was built by the Satanic Temple. It was designed to challenge any government property displaying a monument to the Bible. Their challenge has forced several buildings to remove displays of the Ten Commandments in order to appease those who have no regard for the ethics that made this country great. Shocking as this may be, it is now common for people to believe that any religion one might choose should be considered just as moral and respectable as Judeo-Christianity. But such a belief is a lie. We wouldn't even know right from wrong unless we had God's written word to show us the difference. Notice what the Apostle Paul wrote in this regard. He said, I would not have known sin except through the law. And then Paul gave an example. For I would not have known covetousness unless the law had said, you shall not covet. Contrary to what many like to think, humanity does not have an inherent moral compass. People must learn right from wrong. And the only reason our country was founded on good values is because Western nations were established by a people who had the Bible as a guide. Sadly, those guidelines are becoming blurred today. And the reason is because the nation as a whole has chosen to remove God's moral commandments from the schools, from the courtrooms, and worse yet, from the fabric of our lives. As another example, we are now told that we cannot refer to someone as being a man if they were born male, but they choose to dress and act like a woman. We are told that we cannot consider someone a woman if they were born female, but they choose to behave like a man. And though this identity crisis amounts to little more than false representation and a blatant lie, those who do not agree are told that they must participate in the facade. Why children in schools are being told that they must live a lie. And despite the immoral climate that is being created today, there are still many who profess to believe in God, and they claim to believe in the Bible. But when we consider the behavior of most believers, we find that few take the Bible seriously. Few who identify as being Christian actually think that God's commandments must be kept. Why, they might agree with some of the commandments, such as, you shall not murder, you shall not steal, you shall not commit adultery, but they have a problem with keeping the true Sabbath, and they allow idols to exist around their necks and in their worship centers. They will allow pagan holidays to be observed instead of keeping God's commanded holy days. And in these ways, both liberals and conservatives alike are fulfilling Paul's prophecy when he said that they will become lovers of themselves, lovers of pleasure more than lovers of God, having a form of godliness, but denying its power, meaning they will appear to be righteous, but they will deny God's authority over their lives. Contrary to the ethics of our founding fathers, America does not fear violating God's word any longer. Blasphemy in entertainment no longer warrants an R or a PG rating. Today there's blasphemy in entertainment and education designed for our young minds. And this secular trend puts us in a very dangerous situation as a nation. God warned the nation of Israel, and He warns our people today, that after experiencing His benefits, we must not forget to be thankful and to keep the moral laws written by the one from whom our benefits came. Beware that you do not forget the eternal your God, by not keeping His commandments, His judgments, and His statutes, which I command you today. Lest when you have eaten and are full, and have built beautiful houses and dwell in them, and when you have herds and your flocks multiply, and your silver and your gold are multiplied, and all that you have is multiplied, when your heart is lifted up, and you forget the eternal your God. I testify against you this day that you shall surely perish, because you would not be obedient to the voice of the eternal your God. America is in a steep moral decline. Though we do not know when, God said that those nations who deny Him will eventually perish. This may be a hard pill for most Americans to swallow. I mean, few would think that our nation could ever cease to function the way it has for the last 100 years. They think we're too modern and sophisticated for any great evil to happen to us. Why, America has lost its roots, though. Why, in the early colonists, they understood that their endeavors were guided by God. The Puritans even believed that they were like Israel, who had been singled out to become an example to the nations. And this was the case for nearly 200 years. And there are hundreds of quotes from George Washington to President Ronald Reagan acknowledging God's providence in this country. Why, immigrants wanted to come to America because they saw it as a nation of integrity, and they wanted to be included. Not any longer. Now people come to America for what they can get, not what they can be a part of. Indivisible, America is not any longer. And under God, not anymore. And it boils down to this very attribute that is greatly lacking: gratitude. Not only toward each other, but being grateful to the God who made America great. And the direction that we are headed in is a foolish one. And notice what the Apostle Paul wrote about such behavior. Because although they knew God, they did not glorify Him as God, nor were thankful, but became futile in their thoughts, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Professing to be wise, they became fools. America has more than its share of foolish ingrates who indulge on Thanksgiving and not breathe a word of gratitude to the great God who made each and every meal of our lives possible. Why, it would do America well to consider just how much we have to be grateful for and to acknowledge the source of our blessings. As Psalm 107 says, "Oh, that men would give thanks to the Eternal for His goodness and for His wonderful works to the children of men. Let them sacrifice the sacrifices of thanksgiving and declare His works with rejoicing." So giving thanks to God is a step in the right direction, but this must be taken a step further. We are told to sacrifice the sacrifices of thanksgiving. But how is this to be done? Well, the way is to present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable to God, which is your reasonable service. And this is the key to being a people grateful for all of His benefits. It is to be a living sacrifice by giving up a life of sin and keeping His commandments. Why, Christ said to seek first the kingdom of God and His righteousness, and all the things that we need will be provided. And the righteousness that we are told to seek is the righteousness of God. Well, how do we know what His righteousness is? Psalm 119 and verse 172, "For all your commandments are righteousness." And again in the book of the law, it will be righteousness for us if we are careful to observe all these commandments. So if we desire to be a people with integrity, a person God would consider to be righteous, then we must keep the commandments, not just a few of them while ignoring some or altering others to fit our religion or our lifestyle. Why, those who revere the God of the Bible are in fact required to keep all of the commandments as they are written. And if we choose to not keep the commandments, just as the nation of Israel ceased to exist, iniquity will lead us to a trail of destruction. However, if we desire to do what is right, then Quest for Truth can help you by offering a free book. The Eternal Church of God produces a variety of literature to help people understand the Bible and how God expects faithful people to live. Today we are featuring the book titled The 10 Commandments, answering the question, are they required today? This booklet not only explains from the Bible why believers must keep the commandments, but also how they should be applied. All of our books and booklets are offered free as a service in the public interest, with no undesired follow-up. You may visit our website to read or request this booklet, or in just a few moments we will show you how to receive a free copy of the 10 Commandments. Until next time, this is Terry Moore encouraging all of you to continue your quest for truth.
Thank you for watching Quest for Truth. If you would like the literature offered on this program, please come.
No one knows the day or